a confounding facility in New Mexico caught up in a race to save lives.
It's this weird mix of 19th century bridge building and 21st century Buck Rogers kind of thing.
The search for the location of a highly classified spy mission in Gibraltar.
There have been rumors that secret caves had been deliberately covered up and hidden away.
An Estonian base with an explosive story.
This is a mystical island shrouded in Soviet secrets.
And a site in Italy where life was forever on the edge.
There's always been an air of danger around this town.
Decaying relics. Ruins of lost worlds. Sites haunted by the past. Their secrets waiting to be revealed. At the gateway to the Mediterranean, on the southern tip of Europe, is a much coveted rock.
It's a piece of land sticking out of Spain, but it's not owned by Spain.
All around are signs that it has long been fought over.
If you make it to the top of the rock, you'll find two enormous guns pointing out to the Mediterranean. This place was important enough to defend with some serious firepower.
But below ground, the real secrets of this rocky outcrop have been abandoned and hidden for more than half a century.
Gibraltar had been a place of strange rumors that there were these many secret tunnels.
It is grim. The air is thick with bugs.
If you're fortunate enough to have a torch with you, you just might be able to see glimpses of rusting machinery inside.
This is a dark, nasty place to be.
The top secret operation planned for this grisly dungeon would require sacrifice and service way beyond the call of duty. Gibraltar, aka The Rock, is a British overseas territory. Maintaining control of this strategic peninsula has been a centuries-long struggle.
Well, to say Gibraltar was well armed is a bit of an understatement. Gibraltar was extremely well armed.
Local historian Pete Jackson was once a gunner in Britain's Royal Artillery. He was stationed on Gibraltar.
What we're going to walk to now is a 9.2-inch gun. This is capable of firing a shell 3 miles into Africa.
The Rock overlooks the 8-mile-wide Straits of Gibraltar and sits opposite Morocco.
Gibraltar is a very key piece of real estate, and essentially whoever controls Gibraltar controls the Mediterranean.
It's been a vital British military base since 1704.
They turned the place into a fortress with thousands of soldiers, guns, cannon, cavalry, and navy backup.
When you see the size of the shell listing fires, you won't want to be on the receiving end of it. This is going to put the ship down. One of these things through the side, the ship is not going to survive that.
But with the constant threat of attack, the British needed more than brute force to maintain their grip on Gibraltar. And the secret to their success lies hidden in the rock itself. The towering limestone monolith hides a labyrinth of spectacular caves and natural tunnels. And there's also evidence of human activity below ground.
You see the original drill marks of the tunnel being made in the 1700s. The tunnels that we're in now date from 1782. This is when we started to dig in to defend against attack.
Back then, British defenders needed the tunnels to survive Spanish assault during the Great Siege of Gibraltar. And centuries later, when Adolf Hitler came to power in 1933, the value of Gibraltar was not lost on him.
Hitler had hoped to convince Spain to join the war on his side. And of course, if he could offer Franco Gibraltar, that would be a massive incentive.
The British knew of Hitler's ambitions and that the age-old tunnel system would be crucial in defending the rock.
British commanders in Gibraltar began to develop an extensive set of underground tunnels, utilizing those that had existed before and developing a whole extensive network.
And what we're in here is called the Great North Road. And what it is more or less a main supply route within the tunnels. And this was big enough before all the pipes were fitted to drive a 4-ton truck through. The Great North Road is literally given its name after the Great North Road in Britain. And you'll see as we move along it, you enter from Maida Vale in the south. Turning to the north, we get to Peterborough. We then get to Doncaster and then on to Durham. The reason for this was to allow young conscript miners arriving from the UK the ability to quickly orientate themselves to the system that they were in.
The Royal Engineers carved out around 20 miles of new tunnels to provide bomb-proof accommodation for Britain's Gibraltar Defence Force, which had doubled in size.
So they tripled the length of these tunnels. This new space had room for weapons, ammunition, housing about 16,000 soldiers. They had hospitals, communications, all within this mountain.
Even so, at the start of the Second World War, Hitler's forces looked set to capture Gibraltar. So the British devised an extraordinary intelligence operation that would spring into action when the Germans invaded. It was so highly classified that little is known about it, even today.
For decades, there has been rumors that the Rock of Gibraltar had these secret caves and rooms that were deliberately covered up and hidden away.
More than half a century after the war ended, the long-lost bunker had still not been found. But the hunt continued. For many years, historian Phil Smith has been exploring Gibraltar's tunnels.
In 1997, a group from the local caving club sat down just outside here and felt wind coming through from behind a corrugated iron sheet. When they removed it, they found cast concrete, and as they moved further up, they found a small entrance that leads to this room here.
Until the discovery of these rooms, the top-secret British intelligence operation had been little more than conjecture.
The first time I was brought into this room, I was absolutely amazed. I just couldn't believe here, hidden away inside of the rock, would be a room like this. What's unusual about this room is there aren't any windows anywhere. There's a door on that side, there's a door on this side, but all the rest of it is just solid wall and ceiling. It's a very strange place.
This clandestine complex was the base of Operation Tracer, an audacious British mission to be activated when Hitler conquered Gibraltar.
Operation Tracer was the brainchild of Head of Naval Intelligence, Admiral Sir John Godfrey. If Gibraltar fell, the British would need information on what the enemy were doing, so the plan was to seal 6 naval personnel in this chamber with enough supplies to last them so they could observe and report back on enemy movements in the area.
The discovery of the underground spy base finally proved the existence of Operation Tracer. The 6 volunteers would be entombed within these rooms for the duration of the war. with this 6-inch crack as their only window. There was a 10,000-gallon water tank, food supplies for up to 7 years, and the all-important communications room. From here, they would spy on German military operations and radio their findings to London every night. The floor was covered in cork tiles to dampen sound.
They couldn't afford to make a lot of noise, so we got the cork tiles on the floor, and the door would have been sealed up, and they've got a wall on the outside leading to the tunnel, so all those things would help to keep the area quiet.
And a hand-cranked generator was installed to power the radios.
In the 90s, the cavers found this strange contraption here. You can see the blades on it like a propeller, but there's also a handle here, so it looks like it was hand-operated. It could provide electricity, and being operated by hand, it would give the men a bit of workout, a bit of upper body training to keep them fit and healthy. So now we know why there's 2 toilets here, 6 men potentially sealed in this area for up to 7 years. If you just had 1 toilet and it broke, that would be a very serious problem for the men. So this, along with other things in Operation Tracer, was always a belt and braces with something to support the primary object.
In a remarkable act of bravery, these men would be walled into this underground complex for the duration of the war.
We're not talking about a couple of days or weeks or even months, years of hiding out in utter darkness. You really have to be a person that was truly committed to the cause and one who had high levels of mental toughness.
Operation Tracer was brilliantly conceived. If the people involved were carefully selected and trained, I think it would guarantee success. The concept came from Head of Naval Intelligence, Rear Admiral John Godfrey. It's a brilliant plan, and if it all seems slightly James Bond, then what you should bear in mind is that one of John Godfrey's assistants was a young naval officer called Ian Fleming, who later went on to write the James Bond novels.
In the end, Hitler did not attack Gibraltar, and Operation Tracer was never activated. And when the war was over, the undisclosed complex was surreptitiously sealed up. Today, the British still control Gibraltar, but for how much longer?
Gibraltar is one of those places left behind as not quite ruins of empire, but something like that. But now that Britain is retracted and no longer thinks of itself as an empire, what place does Gibraltar hold?
The Badlands of New Mexico are as remote as it gets. Yet someone has built here.
Inside this open desert is a construction that looks like it's from the 19th century Wild Wild West.
There's this sort of bridge to nowhere that runs off of the ground level onto this platform.
When you get closer, this place gets actually more complicated. It's constructed almost entirely out of wood.
But at the same time, you've got all this clearly modern technology around it.
A bird insignia could be a clue to what went on here. And despite appearances, this creaking structure is part of a wider landscape that has had global impact.
The deserts of New Mexico has a very high pedigree for world-changing science. It was here that the first nuclear bomb was tested.
So what was this ramshackle wooden construction built for? The origins of this site relate to an unprecedented event back in 1962. The launch of Telstar 1. the world's first communications satellite.
Telstar was a real watershed moment of the 20th century.
It was a satellite that was able to broadcast television signal from space for the first time ever.
But 7 months after Telstar launched, it shut down. And it wasn't immediately obvious as to what went wrong.
Today, scientists like Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Hegemeyer of the US Air National Guard only know what happened thanks to this crumbling structure out in the New Mexico desert. Once a highly restricted military facility.
So Telstar 1 went offline because we were doing nuclear testing in the Pacific. Once that bomb went off, it created the first ever electromagnetic pulse.
An electromagnetic pulse, or EMP, is a burst of electromagnetic radiation.
A nuclear explosion causes an EMP because it excites electrons in the ionosphere, which then cause an electromagnetic pulse.
Nuclear electromagnetic pulses cause damaging current and voltage surges, which interfere with electronics in susceptible devices. From mobile phones, to aircraft, to satellites like Telstar 1. An electromagnetic pulse attack today would decimate the technology we now depend on.
EMP was a real national security threat back in the 1960s. But today, an EMP spike would still be devastating.
EMP was such a threat to the American Air Force because our aircraft relied on these electronic systems.
It just wipes out the technology. It wipes out the ability to respond to an attack.
So America needed a way to make its aircraft EMP-proof, and therein was the engineering challenge.
The wooden relic at this site is what they used to subject US military aircraft to the electromagnetic pulse created during a nuclear attack. It's all that remains of a classified testing facility, codenamed Atlas 1.
So simulating an EMP for an airplane in flight is not practical, nor is it really safe, because if you affected the electronics, you could potentially cause the airplane to have issues while in flight. The structure was made out of wood because if it was metal, it would affect the electromagnetic pulse we were trying to simulate. And so the solution was to build the world's largest wooden structure in the middle of the desert.
The design they came up with was inspired by those old railroad trestles. Hence, the name of the structure was trestle.
But the structure couldn't be too high, or they wouldn't be able to get a 100-ton, $300 million aircraft onto it.
The hole-in-the-ground idea was to take a natural hole and dig it out a little bit more, such that we could put the trestle inside of it.
The idea was to roll the plane off of a cliff onto a platform. So finding the hole in the ground was the easy part. The difficult part was being able to design this platform with all of the specific specifications.
That was the job of scientists like Bill Prather.
My role with Atlas 1 was as a member of the engineering design team.
Bill knew that the damaging electromagnetic pulses created by a nuclear blast would wipe out the electronics in American military aircraft. But how were they able to simulate such an explosion on this rickety-looking structure?
It's hard to tell from a distance, but if you look closely, you'll see these cables that look like power lines that are running on either side of the platform. Those are incredibly important to how Atlas 1 actually worked.
The wedge building on this side was used for the instrumentation that recorded the currents measured off of the aircraft. And on either side are high voltage generators that generate the EMP. 8 million volts on each side. And it drives the pulses onto these wire plates, one on this side and one on the far side over here, generating the EMP across this way where the aircraft is parked. We had to do that because we couldn't use nuclear weapons, so we simulated it with high voltage equipment.
Basically, this plane was just inundated and just bombarded with EMP. And then after that, they would turn off the machine, get in, put the key in the ignition, and see if the plane still turned on.
This was cutting-edge technology at the time as well, and they couldn't really tell if it was going to work until they ran their first test.
The EMP pulse from an enemy nuclear attack would put millions of lives in danger. So they put their trust in scientists and engineers.
We knew the structure was good, and we knew the concept would generate the EMP.
When they were ready for their first test, they rolled the aircraft onto the platform, and then they turned on generators, which then fired 16 million volts.
As the structure was blasted with the massive current, to Bill's relief, it worked. It was the first of many Atlas I experiments which showed the US Air Force how to shield electronics from EMPs.
We then added protection to the plane to stop that electrical energy from getting through into the plane.
Atlas I really helped the military make leaps forward in terms of EMP-resistant circuitry.
By making certain that aircraft could still fly, even after being hit with EMPs, we were able to make sure that mutually assured destruction stayed in place. And that's an important piece in keeping the Cold War cold.
In 1991, with the Cold War at an end, the Atlas simulator was finally abandoned. But the efforts of Bill Prather and the Atlas I engineers certainly did not go to waste.
The thing about EMPs is they haven't gone away. Our cell phones, our electrical grids, all these things would just be completely wiped out.
In the Aspromenta Mountains of southern Italy, the shell of a town looms above an inaccessible land.
The town follows the contours of the hillside, winding down all the way to the river at the very end.
There are multiple levels of houses stacked on top of each other, in places as many as 5 stories, all overlooking this deathly drop.
Its desolate streets are paved with the husks of homes and businesses.
There were stacks of gas canisters, the remains of an empty bakery, and even a solitary woman's shoe.
Floors have given away and fallen through. This place is teetering on the edge of total collapse.
A riverbed full of curiously large boulders and scars on the surrounding hillsides could give an insight into what left this place deserted.
You wonder if whatever happened here was completely natural, or if there's something else that could have happened to make everyone leave.
When this village died, a unique and ancient culture died with it. The ghost town of Roghudi Vecchio sits in a precarious position.
The name Roghudi derives from words meaning full of crevasses or just harsh. And looking around here, you can really understand that.
But that's not the most interesting thing about its name. Its name is actually Greek, but we're in Italy.
Roghudi is so cut off from the world that many don't use Italian here, but a dialect of ancient Greek. Former resident Bruno Stellitano is one of the few who can still speak this rare language.
Questa è una lingua pura, perché è stata tramandata esclusivamente orale, senza niente di scritto. Quindi la conosce solo chi la parlava o chi la sentiva parlare dagli anziani. Non c'è altro scritto, non abbiamo niente.
The people of Roghudi claim origins that trace back thousands of years to the ancient Greeks. In the 8th century BC, the Greeks established colonies along the nearby coastlines of the Black and Mediterranean seas.
Many ancient Greeks moved to the coast of Italy, where they founded trading ports.
But over the centuries, invasions by coastal raiders forced these Greek-speaking people to retreat into the mountains, to fortress villages like Roghudi.
Not only did this keep them safe, but it preserved their culture from outside influences for many years to come.
Isolated in this harsh landscape, for centuries they clung to the traditions of their Greek ancestors. Some of them eerily foreshadowed the future.
Not far from the village, there's this strange rock that has confused geologists for years. No one can quite tell if it's naturally made or man-made.
Supposedly, an ancient dragon lived under this rock with a hoard of treasures taken from bandits and thieves.
The residents of Roghudi even sent their priests to feed the dragon, to keep it from destroying their town.
When the priest died, there was no one to feed the dragon. It said that it was so angry that it rose up and created landslides for the rest of the town.
The rugged terrain that had once kept them safe would in the end be their downfall.
This region was prone to earthquakes, and there are two earthquakes that occurred, one in 1905 and another one in 1908.
The earthquakes rocked the whole of southern Italy.
Nel 1908, quando c'è stato il famoso terremoto, Roghudi è stato dichiarato inagibile, solo che la gente non se ne è voluta andare.
And the river valleys that cut through this region contain evidence of an altogether different threat.
The reason why the riverbeds that surround the town are so wide is because when the winter rains and the spring thaw comes, it creates these raging torrents. As all of this water rushes through the landscape, it scours the riverbed and everything in its path.
As the water courses down, it causes mudslides that send boulders powering down towards the riverbeds, putting the mountaintop villages in serious danger. In the 1950s, a series of flash floods threatened to wash Roghudi away. The villagers clung on, but 2 decades later, they weren't so lucky.
In 1971, there was an unprecedented storm.
The saturated ground caused the slopes beneath the village to move.
Quella sera è successo che è caduta la frana che ha causato un finimondo, perché nessuno era di notte e quindi di notte non si vedeva dove erano. Poi si presumeva che potevano cadere anche le case, perché non si vedeva niente.
There was a real fear that the entire town could have come crashing down hundreds of feet at any moment.
On the 16th of February 1971, the town's mayor ordered an evacuation.
The entire population of 1,600 people were forced to pick up everything they owned and leave.
It seemed the freak rainfall was not the only thing to blame for the destruction.
Although the floods definitely weakened the town's foundations, there might be more to this story.
In the 1940s and 1950s, the inhabitants decided that they wanted to install running water and a sewer in the town.
Some locals believe that this may have had an unintended consequence.
Con la fognatura si serviva una zona, perché quelle che erano sotto della strada che non potevano portare i rifiuti dei bagni nella fogna, le scaricavano nella roccia.
When the floods hit in 1971, it's possible that the new drainage system had already weakened the ground below the town.
There's a cruel irony in that trying to bring modern conveniences to their town, they may have signed its death warrant.
Some residents attempted to return over the years, but most stayed away, and Roghudi was left to rot. Although the people here lost homes and livelihoods, there was another casualty of the floods.
It was not only the town that was decimated by these disasters, they also severely diminished the ancient Greco-Italian culture of the region.
Once widely used across the region, today, Calabrian Greek is spoken only by a remaining few.
Io mi auguro che resista ancora, però è in corso di estinzione.
Off the coast of Estonia sits a small island with a big secret.
If you look at the island from above, you can't see much apart from a thick covering of evergreen forest.
This forest cover is hiding a narrow gauge railway.
If you follow along this railroad track, it will lead you to these pretty imposing structures.
The threatening installations are clearly military.
All along the shoreline of this island are concrete emplacements, and they've got no windows.
When you come up to these buildings, you see all these things scattered about.
And the rusting remains of heavy ordnance may explain the absence of life here.
Something dangerous must have been going on here. Well, this place was once heavily guarded, so what was it hiding?
Estonia's Naissaar Island sits in the Gulf of Finland, a strategically important stretch of sea.
Soome laht on ilmselt meredest kõige enam mineeritum paik üldse maailmas. Erinevatel aegadel on siia lastud kuni 60 000 meremiini. Ikka ja jälle tuleb merepõhjast neid vanu miine välja.
Ola Goffman's family has a strong link to this place.
Aga see saar on olnud paljude inimeste jaoks tundmatu maa, sest ta on olnud 50 aastat suletud olnud. Ja mina pääsesin siia samuti esimest korda oma elus 1995, kui see saar avati uuesti.
He was following in the footsteps of his grandfather, Johannes, who had come to Naissaar when it was still controlled by Russia.
Minu vanaisa tuli siia saarele 1920. aastate paiku. Ja see sadam on suuresti see põhjus, miks ta siia saarele tuli. Ta oli elukutselt ehitaja.
The island had been inhabited by fishermen and seal hunters for hundreds of years. But because of its strategic position, it began to attract the attention of major militaries.
You've got Finland to the north, you've got Russia to the east, Estonia to the south, and Sweden to the west.
In the early decades of the 20th century, Tsarist Russia was on the defensive.
The original defences were built in 1914 when Estonia was part of the Russian Empire. They'd just suffered a humiliating defeat against Japan, so the empire, led by Tsar Nicholas II, decided to build a series of coastal fortifications to protect St. Petersburg.
Need olid kõige suuremad suurtükid üldse, mis siia Naissaarele paigutati. Ja kaugus oli umbes 30 kilomeetrit laskeulatus, kuhu nad jõudsid.
And there are more Tsarist constructions hidden in the woods.
Ja siin elasid ohvitserid nende peredega. Toon aimu sellest, et mida tol ajal ilusaks peeti ja mismoodi neid kaunistati aknaid. Siin loomulikult lageplats, siia tuli selline korralik allee ja
Following the Russian Revolution in 1917, Naissaar continued under Russian control, this time under the communists. And soon, Olar's grandfather, Johannes, was one of the only residents left.
Kuna ta oli ehitaja ja tundis kõiki neid kindlustusrajatisi ja Nõukogude armee siis kasutas teda, et annaks neile teadmisi nendest kindlustustest ja oleks neile abiks.
For the Soviets, the island's dense forest was extremely appealing.
Around 85% of the island is covered in forest, making it perfect for covert missions.
The Soviets see the location of the island as an important one. From that place, they're going to be able to dominate and control the Baltic Sea. They spend a lot of time and a lot of energy building a whole industrial complex there on the island under the cover of the forest.
This is the Naissaar Sea Mines factory.
Selles hoones siis komplekteeriti miinid enne nende veeskamist. Siin on näha otsas üks bassein, kus tehti siis teste, et kas miinid on ka piisavalt vettpidavad. Selle telfriga võeti siis miin ja pandi mingiks ajaks siia basseini. Ja kui siis vett sisse ei läinud, siis oli ta ilmselt kõlbulik kasutuseks.
It was the largest naval mine factory in the whole of the Baltic. It had workshops, storage facilities, barracks, a network of subterranean bunkers, and even a power station.
These mines were incredibly dangerous. When one of them exploded in the water, the shock from it could be felt over a mile away.
Moving such dangerous weapons around the island was no easy task.
Sest kõrvale on siin näha on saare sellised kohalikud teed, need on kõik sellised liivased ja pehmed, nii et sellistel teedel midagi suuremat vedada on ilmselt võimatav. Nõukogude ajal ehitati ka juurde 7 kilomeetrit raudteed. Just nimelt, et teenindada neid miiniladu.
They could be moved safely, silently, without having to build up stores of vehicles and vehicle fuel.
All the sites on the island were connected by rail. After assembly, these deadly weapons would be transported again to the harbour and out into the far reaches of the Soviet Union.
Naissaar was fortified yet further when the Cold War intensified and secrecy heightened.
In the 1960s, the Soviets moved beyond mines, and they actually built a missile base.
Hetkel asume me nõukogudeaegse ühe salastatuma objekti juures. See on niinimetatud õhutõrje raketibaas. Nendes angaarides olid siis 60ndatel aastatel õhutõrjeraketid S08, millel oli 3-kordne ülehelikiirus ja tõelised modernsed relvad tol ajal. Ja siin hoones all asus ka selle raketibaasi komandopunkt. See oli siis, nagu ma ütlesin, Naissaare üks salastatumaid objekte.
At the end of the Cold War, thousands of sea mines were abandoned here.
They dismantle and disarm something like 13,000 of these mines. When you walk across the island today, you see hundreds, thousands of empty shells of these formerly active mines.
But one mystery remains unsolved.
Viimane, mida ma tean oma vanaisast, oli see, et mõistis sõjatribunal talle 5 aastat vangistus selle eest, et ta olla omanud relva. Edasi kõik need jäljed kaovad vanaisast ja ei ole kuskil andmeid, millisesse vangilaagrisse või kuhu ta viidi, nii et meil on alust arvata, et tegelikult vanaisa hukati siin saarel. Ja ta ongi siia jäänud.
Today, Naissaar welcomes back visitors of all kinds.
In 1995, Nassau Island becomes a nature reserve. So tourists and hikers can go and walk on this once forbidden and very dangerous island.
Tänasel päeval on aastaringselt elavaid inimesi umbes 10 ja suveelanikke on siin umbes 50 ümber. Siis loomulikult, kui on nüüd sadam korda tehtud aastal 2020, on siia mugav tulla ka oma paatide, oma jahtidega ja kuna see on ainult mõne tunni kaugusel jahiga tulles, siis on ta väga populaarne koht inimestele, et tulla nädalavahetusel.